Caribbean sun was setting over the port of San Sebastian, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Captain Elena Cortez stood at the helm of her ship, the Morning Star, watching the last of the merchant vessels drift into harbour for the night. The warm breeze carried the scent of salt and distant rain, and somewhere in the rigging above, her crew sang an old sailing song in voices grown soft with the approaching dusk. Eleanor was not like the pirates of legend, the ones who terrorized these waters with black flags and cannon fire. She was a salvager, a seeker of lost things, someone who believed the ocean kept its secrets just beneath the surface, waiting for patient hands to uncover them. Her ship was small but swift, her crew loyal and few, and her reputation was one of curiosity rather than cruelty. Tonight, as the stars began to prick through the darkening sky, Eleanor found herself unable to sleep. She walked the deck quietly, her bare feet knowing every plank and rope by heart. The Morning Star creaked and swayed gently at anchor, and the water lapped against the hull in a rhythm as old as time itself. It was then that she saw it. Floating near the starboard side, catching the last light of day, was a bottle. Not unusual in these waters, sailors often tossed messages and prayers to the sea, but something about this one called to her. The glass was old, green as seaweed, and inside she could see the pale edge of paper. Elena reached down with the boat hook and carefully lifted it aboard. The cork came free with a soft sigh, as if the bottle had been holding its breath for years. Inside was a map, yellowed and delicate, its edges torn but its lines still clear. She carried it to her cabin and spread it carefully on the chart table, lighting 3 candles to see by. The map showed an archipelago she recognized, the Windward Isles, a scatter of small islands east of Martinique. But there was an island marked on this map that appeared on none of her charts. It was drawn in careful detail: a crescent bay, a waterfall, 3 distinctive peaks like fingers reaching toward the sky. And in the center, marked with a small X and written in faded ink, El Tesoro de la Marea Susurrante, the treasure of the whisper tide. But it was the other marking that made Elena's breath catch. In the corner of the map, drawn in the same careful hand, was a ship. Not just any ship, a galleon with distinctive high sails, and Elena sat back slowly. Every sailor in the Caribbean knew the story of the Esperanza, the Spanish treasure ship that had vanished without a trace 50 years ago, carrying a fortune in gold and jewels from the New World back to Spain. Some said it had sunk in a storm. Others claimed it had been taken by pirates and scuttled, but most believed it had simply sailed into legend, the way ships sometimes do, becoming more ghost than memory. And now here was a map, suggesting it might be found. Elena looked at the map for a long time, tracing the route with her finger. The journey would take them through open water and then into the maze of smaller islands where navigation was treacherous and charts were often wrong. It would mean leaving the safety of the trade routes, venturing into waters where few ships travelled. But Eleanor had always been drawn to mysteries the way birds are drawn to morning, and something about this map felt different, not like a trap or a fool's dream, but like a door, opening to a story that wanted to be finished. She rolled the map carefully and placed it in her leather case. Then she stood and walked back out onto the deck. The night was fully dark now, and overhead the stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. The crew had settled into their hammocks below, and only young Marcus stood watch, his eyes scanning the quiet harbour. "Marcus," Elena said softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy turned, his face brightening. He couldn't have been more than 16, with eyes that still held wonder instead of weariness. "Captain, can't sleep." "Not tonight," Elena said. She looked out at the dark water, at the stars reflected there like a second sky beneath them. "Tell me, do you believe in ghost ships?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. My grandmother used to say that some ships don't want to die, that they keep sailing, waiting for someone to find them and tell their story. Elena smiled. A wise woman, your grandmother. She paused, then added, how would you feel about a different kind of voyage? Not for trade or salvage, but for something older? Marcus's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that reminded Elena why she loved the sea, because it promised always the possibility of wonder. Where would we go? Into the Windward Isles, Elena said, to look for something that might not want to be found. A treasure? Perhaps. Or perhaps just an answer to a very old question. Marcus nodded slowly, his young face serious now. The crew will follow you, Captain. They always do. Elena put a hand on his shoulder. Then at first light we prepare to sail. But for now, go and rest. We'll need clear eyes and steady hands for what's ahead. As Marcus headed below, Elena remained on deck, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the map she knew, an island waited. And perhaps, if the old stories held any truth, a ship that had been waiting 50 years to tell its tale. The wind picked up slightly, warm and steady from the east. Elena breathed it in, tasting the promise of adventure, the salt and mystery of the open sea. Tomorrow they would sail. Tomorrow the search would begin. But tonight there was only the gentle rocking of the morning star, the whisper of water against wood, and the ancient, patient stars standing watch over all the secrets the ocean keeps. Elena finally went to her cabin, but she did not sleep. Instead, she studied the map by candlelight, memorizing every line, every mark, every clue. And when she finally closed her eyes, it was not to dreams of gold or jewels, but to the image of a ship with angel wings, waiting somewhere in the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, its story unfinished, its secrets ready to be told. Dawn came to San Sebastian like a gift, soft and golden, spreading warmth across the harbour waters. Captain Elena Cortez stood on deck as her crew made the morning star ready for departure. The air was filled with the sounds of preparation, the creak of rope through pulleys, the gentle thud of supplies being loaded, the quiet conversations of sailors who had woken to news of an unexpected voyage. Elena's first mate, a weathered woman named Rosa, with silver threaded through her dark hair, approached with the ship's log tucked under her arm. Rosa had sailed with Elena for nearly a decade, and there was little that happened aboard the Morning Star that escaped her notice. The crew is curious, Rosa said, her voice carrying the lilting accent of her native Cuba. We were meant to take on cargo today, deliver textiles to Barbados. Instead, you have us provisioning for open water. Elena met her friend's eyes. Rosa deserved the truth, or as much of it as Elena understood herself. She pulled the map from her jacket and unfolded it on the capstan between them. Rosa studied it in silence, her calloused fingers tracing the route. When she looked up, there was something in her expression Elena couldn't quite read. Caution, perhaps, mixed with a flicker of something that might have been hope. The Esperanza, Rosa said quietly. My mother told me stories about that ship when I was a girl. She said her own grandmother had seen it sail from Havana, all white sails and gold fittings, looking like something from a dream. She paused. She also said it was cursed. Most treasure ships are in the stories, Elena said, but stories grow with the telling. Perhaps the truth is simpler. Or perhaps it's more complicated. Rosa folded the map carefully and handed it back. But you're going anyway, aren't you? Whether I counsel caution or not. Elena smiled. I am, but I'd rather go with your blessing than without it. Rosa sighed, but there was affection in it. You have my blessing, Captain, and my concern. These waters, she gestured toward the open sea beyond the harbour. They're not like the trade routes. The currents are strange, the weather unpredictable. Ships have vanished there." "Then we'll be careful," Elena said. "We'll watch the sky and trust our instincts, the same as we always do." Rosa nodded slowly, then turned to call out to the crew, "All hands, prepare to cast off. We sail with the tide." The Morning Star came alive with activity. Sails were unfurled, lines were coiled, the anchor was raised with the rhythmic chant of the crew working in unison. Eleanor took her place at the helm, feeling the familiar weight of the wheel in her hands, the way the ship responded to her touch like a living thing. As they cleared the harbour mouth and the open Caribbean spread before them, Eleanor felt the tension in her shoulders ease. This was where she belonged, between sky and water, with the wind in the sails and the horizon calling. Whatever lay ahead, whatever mysteries or dangers the map might lead them to, at least they would face them honestly, with clear purpose and open heart. The first day's sailing was peaceful. They followed the coast eastward, the green hills of the mainland sliding past to their left, the endless blue stretching to their right. The crew settled into the familiar rhythms of shipboard life. Watches were kept, meals were prepared, sails were adjusted to catch the steady trade winds that blew warm and constant from the northeast. Young Marcus proved himself useful in ways beyond his years. He had a gift for climbing, scrambling up the rigging like a monkey to check the condition of the sails or scan the horizon from the crow's nest. In the evening, as the sun began its descent toward the western sea, he came to stand beside Elena at the helm. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her, "about ghost ships." "And what have you concluded?" "That maybe they're not really ghosts at all. Maybe they're just waiting, like a letter that never got delivered, or a story that stopped in the middle." Elena smiled. "That's a hopeful way to think of it." "Is that what we're doing? Delivering a letter? Finishing a story?" "Perhaps," Elena said. "Or perhaps we're just satisfying our own curiosity. Either way, it seems like a worthy use of our time." That night, they anchored in a small cove sheltered by a promontory of dark rock. The crew ate their evening meal on deck, enjoying the cool air and the sound of waves breaking gently on the nearby shore. Someone brought out a fiddle, and soon there was music. Not the work songs they sang during the day, but slower, sweeter melodies that drifted across the water like prayers. Elena sat with Rosa near the stern, both women watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "Tell me about the curse," Elena said. "The one your mother mentioned?" Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "It was something about betrayal," she said finally. "The Esperanza was carrying more than treasure, according to the stories. There was a passenger, a Spanish nobleman, who had stolen something sacred from a temple in the New World. The indigenous people whose temple it was put a curse on the ship, said it would never reach safe harbour, that it would sail forever, neither sinking nor arriving." "But ships don't sail forever," Elena said. "Eventually they rot, they sink, they're broken apart by storms." "That's what makes it a curse," Rosa replied. "Not that it lasts forever, but that it doesn't end the way it should, that it becomes something other than what it was meant to be." Elena considered this. "And if we find it, what then?" "Then perhaps we give it the ending it was denied," Rosa said. "Or perhaps we become part of the story ourselves." "That doesn't sound so terrible," Elena said. "Being part of a story." Rosa laughed softly. "You always were too brave for your own good, Elena. But that's why we follow you." The second day brought them into more open water. The mainland fell behind, becoming first a grey line on the horizon, then disappearing entirely. Now there was only ocean in all directions, the colour shifting throughout the day from deep indigo to brilliant turquoise as the depth changed beneath them. Elena kept close watch on the map, checking their position against the stars at night and the sun's height at noon. They were making good time, pushed along by favourable winds. At this rate, they would reach the Windward Isles within 3 days. But on the afternoon of the second day, something changed. It started with the birds. A flock of frigate birds appeared, circling high above the ship, their distinctive forked tails silhouetted against the clouds. Frigate birds were common enough in these waters, but these birds were behaving strangely. They circled again and again, never moving on, as if they were keeping pace with the morning star. Then the dolphins came. A pod of them, perhaps 20 strong, appeared off the port bow. They leapt and played in the ship's wake, their sleek bodies flashing silver in the sunlight. The crew gathered along the rail to watch, delighted by the display. Dolphins were considered good luck by sailors, a sign of safe passage and fair weather. But Elena noticed something odd. The dolphins weren't just playing, they seemed to be leading. Every time the morning star drifted even slightly off course, the dolphins would move, positioning themselves ahead of the ship as if to guide it back on track. Rosa noticed it too. She came to stand beside Eleanor, her eyes on the water. "They're showing us the way," she said. "Or warning us away," Elena replied. "It's hard to tell. Do we follow them?" Elena checked the map, then looked at the dolphins, then back at the map. The route the dolphins seemed to be suggesting matched the course she had plotted. "We follow," she decided, but carefully. As the sun set that evening, painting the water in shades of coral and gold, the dolphins disappeared as suddenly as they had come. One moment they were there, leaping and calling, and the next the water was empty, save for the gentle swell of waves. The frigate birds, however, remained. That night, Eleanor dreamed. She dreamed she was standing on the deck of a ship that was not the Morning Star. This ship was larger, older, with towering masts and sails that seemed to glow faintly in darkness. She could hear voices speaking in Spanish, urgent and afraid. Someone was crying, someone else was praying. And then she saw her, a woman in a white dress standing at the rail, looking out at the dark water. Her face was in shadow, but Eleanor could feel her sadness like a weight in the air. "We never arrived," the woman said, though her lips didn't move. "We sailed and sailed, but we never arrived." Eleanor wanted to ask where they had been going, what had happened, but before she could speak, the woman turned to look at her, and Elena saw that her eyes were the colour of sea glass, green and ancient, and full of something that might have been hope. "You're looking for us," the woman said. "We've been waiting so long for someone to look for us." Elena woke with a start. The cabin was dark except for the faint moonlight coming through the small window. She could hear the familiar sounds of the ship, creaking wood, the slap of water against the hull, footsteps on the deck above. But for a moment, she could still feel the presence of that other ship, that other time, like an echo that hadn't quite faded. She rose and went on deck. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead. At the helm, one of her crew members, a quiet man named Thomas, stood watch. "All quiet, Captain?" he asked when he saw her. "All quiet," Elena confirmed, though it wasn't entirely true. Something had changed. She could feel it in the air, in the way the wind moved, in the patience of the sea beneath them. They were getting closer to something. Whether it was the island from the map or something else entirely, Eleanor couldn't say. But the Esperanza was out there somewhere, waiting. And with each nautical mile they travelled, Elena became more certain that they were meant to find it. Not for the treasure, if treasure there was, but for the story, for the ending that had been delayed for 50 years, for the souls aboard who had never made it home. On the morning of the third day, the Windward Isles appeared on the horizon like emeralds scattered across blue silk. Elena stood at the bow of the Morning Star, watching the islands grow larger as they approached. From a distance, they looked peaceful. Lush green peaks rising from crystalline water, white beaches gleaming in the sunlight, clouds drifting lazily around the highest summits. But Eleanor had learned long ago that the Caribbean kept its secrets well. What looked peaceful from afar could hide reefs sharp enough to tear open a hull, currents strong enough to drag a ship off course, or simply the loneliness of places where few people ventured. Rosa joined her at the rail, a spyglass in hand. She scanned the islands methodically, her expression thoughtful. "There must be 24 islands in this group," she said. "Some no bigger than a pile of rocks, others large enough to hide a village." "The map shows one that's shaped like a crescent," Elena said, "with 3 peaks and a waterfall on the western side." "I see several with multiple peaks," Rosa replied, "but from this distance, it's hard to tell which might match." She lowered the spyglass. "We'll need to get closer, navigate between them. It could take days to search them all." "Then we have days," Elena said simply. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now." As they entered the archipelago, the character of the sea changed. The deep blue of open water gave way to shades of turquoise and jade as the depth decreased. Elena could see the sandy bottom in places, could see dark patches that meant rocks or coral formations. Navigation here required constant attention, constant adjustment. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, calling out depths as they measured them with the lead line, adjusting the sails to slow their progress, keeping watch for any sign of danger. Young Marcus climbed to the crow's nest and served as their eyes, calling down what he could see: an island with white cliffs to port, a narrow channel ahead, a flock of pelicans roosting on a rocky outcrop. They sailed carefully between 2 larger islands, following a channel that ran deep and clear. On either side, the islands rose steeply from the water, their slopes covered in thick vegetation. Elena could hear the calls of birds, parrots and mockingbirds and others she didn't recognize. The air smelled different here, heavy with the scent of flowers and growing things mixed with the ever-present salt of the sea. As they emerged from the channel into a wider stretch of water, Marcus called down from above. "Captain, I see something strange." Elena looked up. "What is it?" "One of the islands ahead. There's mist around it, but it's only around that one island. The others are clear." Elena and Rosa exchanged glances. It was mid-morning, the sun high and bright. Mist at this hour, in this heat, was unusual to say the least. "Take us closer," Elena told the helmsman, "but carefully, and everyone keep watch." As they approached, the island Marcus had spotted came into clearer view. It was medium-sized, perhaps 2 miles across, and shaped like a crescent, with 3 distinct peaks rising from its spine. On the western side, Elena could see a white thread of water, a waterfall, cascading down the rocks into the sea. It matched the map perfectly, but Marcus was right about the mist. A thin fog clung to the island, wreathing its peaks and drifting across its beaches. It moved strangely, not like normal fog that flowed and dissipated, but almost as if it were breathing, contracting and expanding in a slow, steady rhythm. "I don't like this," Rosa murmured. "Mist like that in weather like this. It's not natural." "Perhaps there's a cave," Elena suggested, "or a spring, something that creates the right conditions for fog." "Perhaps," Rosa said, but she sounded unconvinced. They circled the island slowly, taking its measure. The crescent shape created a natural bay on the eastern side, protected from the prevailing winds. The water there was calm and impossibly clear. Elena could see down 20 feet or more, could see colourful fish darting among the coral, could see the sandy bottom rippled by ancient currents. But she saw no wreckage, no sign of the Esperanza or any other ship. "We'll anchor in the bay," Elena decided. "Send a landing party ashore, see what we can find." The crew prepared the ship's boat, a sturdy rowboat that could carry 6 people comfortably. Elena chose her party carefully. Rosa, because her judgment was sound and her courage unquestionable. Marcus, because his young eyes were sharp and his curiosity matched her own. And 3 others: Thomas, who was strong and steady; Maria, who knew plants and could identify what was safe to eat or use, and old Santos, who had sailed these waters longer than anyone and knew their moods in secret. As they rowed toward shore, Eleanor studied the island more closely. The beach was white sand mixed with small shells, untouched and pristine. Behind it, the vegetation grew thick, palms and sea grapes and vines that created a green wall. The waterfall she had seen from the ship was visible now, tumbling down black rocks in a series of cascades before flowing into a pool that fed a small stream to the sea. The mist hung in the air like a veil, neither thick enough to obscure vision, nor thin enough to seem normal. And it was cool, distinctly cooler than the warm Caribbean air should have been. They pulled the boat up onto the beach and stood for a moment, listening. The island was not silent. Eleanor could hear birds calling in the trees, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the constant whisper of the waterfall. But there was something else beneath those sounds, or perhaps woven through them, a quality of stillness, as if the island were holding its breath. "Stay together," Elena said, "and stay alert. If anyone sees anything unusual, speak up immediately." They moved inland, following the stream toward the waterfall. The vegetation grew thick on either side, but the stream bed provided a natural path. The stones were smooth and water-worn, easy to walk on. Fish darted in the clear water, tiny silver things no bigger than Elena's finger. Maria paused to examine some of the plants growing along the bank. "I know most of these," she said, "common enough on Caribbean islands, but this," she pointed to a flowering vine with white blooms, "I've never seen before. Beautiful, though." The flowers were indeed beautiful, star-shaped and luminous even in the shade. They seemed to glow faintly, as if lit from within. "Don't touch anything we don't recognize," Elena cautioned. "Beautiful things can be dangerous." They continued on and soon reached the base of the waterfall. The pool there was deep and clear, surrounded by black rocks draped with ferns and moss. The air was cool and damp, filled with the sound of falling water. And there, carved into the rock face beside the waterfall, nearly hidden by vines and thyme, was something that made Eleanor's breath catch. A symbol, a design of intersecting lines and curves that formed a pattern she almost recognized but couldn't quite place. It was old, ancient perhaps, worn smooth by weather and water, but it had been made deliberately, carved with care and intention. Santos stepped closer, his weathered face thoughtful. "I've seen markings like this before," he said, "on some of the oldest islands. The indigenous people who lived here before the Spanish came. They left signs, messages maybe, or warnings." "What did they mean?" Marcus asked, his voice hushed. "That's the trouble," Santos replied. "Most of the people who could read them are long gone. Their knowledge died with them." Elena traced the symbol with her eyes, committing it to memory. It felt important somehow, as if it were the first word of a sentence they needed to understand. Rosa was scanning the area around the pool, her hand resting on the knife at her belt, not threatening, but prepared. "Captain," she said suddenly, "look at the rocks, the ones in the pool." Elena looked. The rocks in the pool were arranged in a pattern, not random, but deliberate. They formed a line pointing deeper inland, toward the 3 peaks at the island's center. "Someone's been here," Rosa said, "and they wanted whoever came after to know which way to go." "The question is when," Elena replied. "This could be 50 years old, or 500. "Only one way to find out," Marcus said, and there was excitement in his young voice despite the strangeness of the place. They followed the direction indicated by the stones, leaving the stream and pushing into the vegetation. The going was harder here, the undergrowth thick, but someone had been this way before. Eleanor could see the faint trace of an old path, overgrown but still discernible. The mist grew thicker as they climbed, until they were walking through a world of grey and green, where sounds were muffled and distances became hard to judge. Elena kept her hand on the compass in her pocket, checking their direction, making sure they didn't lose their bearings. After perhaps half an hour of steady climbing, they emerged into a clearing. And there, in the centre of the clearing, was another sign that people had been here long ago. It was a cairn, a pile of stones stacked carefully, deliberately. On top of the cairn sat something that gleamed dully in the diffused light filtering through the mist. Elena approached slowly. The object was a small chest, made of dark wood bound with tarnished brass. It was locked, but the lock was old, corroded by salt air and time. "Should we open it?" Marcus asked. Elena hesitated. Everything about this felt significant. The island matching the map, the carved symbol, the deliberately placed stones, and now this chest, left here for someone to find, but left by whom, and when, and why? "We open it," she decided, "but carefully." Thomas used the handle of his knife to pry at the lock. It resisted at first, then gave way with a snap. The lid opened with a creak of old hinges. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived the decades, was a book. A journal, Elena realized as she lifted it carefully from the chest. The leather cover was worn but intact, and when she opened it, she found pages covered in neat handwriting, the ink faded but still legible. The first page bore a date, 15 de Julio, 1742, 53 years ago, and beneath the date, a name, Capitán Diego Álvarez de la Vega. Elena's heart beat faster. This was the captain of the Esperanza. It had to be. She read the first entry aloud, translating from Spanish as she went. "We have anchored in a bay on an island that appears on no charts. The crew is uneasy. They say the mist that surrounds this place is unnatural, that we should leave immediately. But we have no choice. The ship is damaged from the storm, and we must make repairs before we can continue. I have sent parties ashore to find fresh water and timber. The island seems deserted, though we found strange carvings near a waterfall. My first mate, Carlos, believes they are warnings. But warnings of what?" Elena turned the page, but Rosa put a hand on her arm. "Captain," she said quietly, "look around." Elena lowered the journal and realized what Rosa meant. The clearing they stood in was not natural. The ground was too level, the spacing of the trees too regular. This had been a camp, a temporary settlement. And now that she looked more carefully, she could see other signs. Depressions in the ground where tents might have stood. A circle of stones that had once contained a fire. Pieces of wood, rotted and moss-covered, that might have been parts of crates or barrels. The crew of the Esperanza had been here. They had camped on this very spot. "Where's the ship?" Marcus asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. If they anchored in the bay, if they came ashore and made camp here, where did the Esperanza go? Elena closed the journal carefully and looked toward the 3 peaks rising above them, still half hidden in mist. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to read the rest of this journal, and then we need to climb to the top of those peaks and see what we can see." Because something told her, some instinct born of years at sea and countless mysteries solved, that the Esperanza hadn't left this island. Not entirely. It was here somewhere, waiting. Changed perhaps by time and circumstance, but here. The ghost ship, it seemed, had finally been found. Or at least they had found the place where its story had been interrupted. Where the curse, if curse there was, had taken hold. Where 53 years ago a crew of sailors had made camp and written journals and waited for something that perhaps had never come. Elena looked at her companions, at Rosa's cautious eyes, at Marcus's excited face, at the steady patience of the others. "We came to find answers," she said. "I think we're about to get them. But whatever we learn, we face it together. Agreed?" "Agreed," they said, one after another, their voices soft in the mist-shrouded clearing. And so, as the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward evening, they settled down to read the journal of Captain Diego Alvarez de la Vega and to learn what had happened to the Esperanza and her crew on this nameless, mist-haunted island in the heart of the Windward Isles. They sat in a circle in the clearing, the journal open in Elena's lap. The afternoon light filtering through the mist gave everything a dreamlike quality, as if they had stepped outside of time itself. Elena read aloud, her voice steady, translating the captain's Spanish into words her crew could understand. 16 de julio, 1742. The repairs to the Esperanza proceed slowly. The carpenter reports that we need more timber than we thought. The storm damaged not just the hull, but some of the structural beams. We may be here for weeks rather than days. The crew grows more restless. Last night, 3 men swore they saw lights moving in the jungle. When the watch went to investigate, they found nothing. But they did find more of those carvings, dozens of them, carved into trees and rocks all around our camp. Carlos believes we should leave immediately, repairs or no repairs. But we would never make it back to Spain with the ship in this condition. We would sink in the first storm. Elena paused, turning the page carefully. The next entry was dated 2 days later. 18 de julio. Something happened last night that I cannot explain. We heard singing, not from our crew, but from somewhere deeper in the island. Women's voices, high and clear, singing in a language none of us recognized. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Several of the men wanted to investigate, but I forbade it. Whatever is on this island, it was here long before we arrived, and it may not welcome our presence. We will finish our repairs and leave as quickly as possible. But there is something else. The treasure we carry, the gold and jewels from the New World, the crew whispers that it is cursed. They say that one of the artifacts we took from a temple in Mexico was sacred, that the priest put a curse on anyone who removed it. I told them this is superstitious nonsense. But I confess, even I feel uneasy. The artifact in question is a small golden idol, no bigger than a man's hand, shaped like a bird with outstretched wings. It is beautiful beyond measure. But when I look at it, I feel watched, as if the idol itself has eyes, though it has none. Rosa shifted uncomfortably. A cursed idol, she murmured, just like my mother's story said. Eleanor continued reading. The entries became more troubled as the days passed. 20 de julio, we found one of our men this morning, sitting by the waterfall, staring at nothing. His name is Pedro, a good sailor, steady and reliable. But when we tried to speak to him, he didn't respond. He just kept staring at the water, tears running down his face. When we finally got him to speak, all he would say was, "She's waiting. She's been waiting so long." We brought him back to camp, but he will not eat, will not sleep. He just sits and stares toward the waterfall. 21 de julio. 3 more men have been affected. They wander away from camp and must be brought back. They all say the same thing, that someone is waiting, that someone needs them. The ship's priest performed a blessing over the camp, but I don't know if it will help. I am beginning to think Carlos was right. We should have left when we had the chance. Marcus leaned forward. What happened to them, the men who wandered away? Let me read more, Elena said. She turned several pages, scanning the entries. The captain's handwriting became less neat as the days progressed, as if written in haste or distress. 25 de julio. Half the crew is now afflicted. They speak of a woman in white who calls to them from the peaks. They say she is lonely, that she has been alone for hundreds of years, that she only wants company. I had the golden idol locked in my cabin, thinking perhaps removing it from sight would help. It did not. If anything, things have grown worse. The carpenter tells me the repairs are nearly complete. Another 3 days, perhaps 4, and we can sail. I pray we have that long. 26 de Julio, Carlos is gone. He was standing watch last night, and this morning his post was abandoned. We found his footprints leading up the mountain toward the highest peak. We followed them until the trail became too dangerous to continue. We called for him, but heard only our own voices echoing back. I am sending this journal back to the ship, in the hopes that if something happens to us, someone will find it and understand what occurred here. I am taking the golden idol and a small party of men who remain unaffected. We will climb to the highest peak and return the idol to whatever power dwells there. Perhaps that will break the curse. Perhaps it will at least give the rest of my crew a chance to sail away. The next entry was written in a different hand, shakier, less confident. 27 de Julio. I am Miguel Santos, second carpenter of the Esperanza. Captain Alvarez took 10 men and climbed into the mountains yesterday. They have not returned. Those of us who remain are perhaps 20 in number. The ship is repaired enough to sail, but without the captain or the officers, we are lost. Some want to wait. Others want to leave immediately. I do not know what to do. The singing started again last night, but this time it wasn't just women's voices. I heard Captain Alvarez singing too, and Carlos, and all the others who had gone up the mountain. They were singing together, their voices blending with the others, and it was the most beautiful and most terrible thing I have ever heard. There was one final entry, dated the next day, written in an almost illegible scrawl. 28 de Julio, we are leaving. God forgive us, but we are leaving. We will sail the Esperanza as far as we can and pray we can find a friendly port. We are leaving this journal in the hopes that Captain Alvarez might return and find it. We are leaving supplies, food, water, tools. We are leaving because we must. Because if we stay another night, we will all be drawn up that mountain, and none of us will ever leave. To whoever finds this, do not climb the peaks, do not follow the singing, do not seek the woman in white. Some places are not meant for the living. Some mysteries should remain unsolved. We learned this too late. Perhaps you will be wiser than we were. Elena closed the journal slowly. The clearing was very quiet. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. So the Esperanza left, Maria said softly. The survivors sailed her away. But what happened to the ship after that? It still vanished. That much is known. And what about the captain and the others? Marcus added. The ones who climbed the mountain, what happened to them? Eleanor looked up at the 3 peaks, rising above them like fingers reaching toward the sky. The mist swirled around them, thicker now as evening approached. And as she looked, she thought she saw something, just for a moment, a flicker of white near the highest peak, like a dress catching the light, or a hand waving in greeting. I think, Elena said carefully, that we need to decide what to do. The journal advises us to leave, to not investigate further. And that's wise counsel. These men knew more about what happened here than we do. But, Rosa prompted, because she knew Eleanor well enough to hear the unspoken word. But Captain Alvarez and his men are still up there, Eleanor said, or at least their story is. And so is the golden idol, perhaps, the thing that started all of this. If we leave now, we leave them to whatever fate has claimed them. We leave the mystery unsolved. And if we stay, Thomas asked, if we climb up there, what happens to us? I don't know, Elena admitted. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps we'll find explanations for everything, natural caves that create the mist, acoustics that make echoes sound like singing, men who succumbed to fever or fear and wandered into the jungle. Perhaps it's all less mysterious than the journal makes it seem. And perhaps it's exactly as mysterious as it seems, Rosa said. Perhaps more so. Eleanor looked at each of them in turn. I won't ask anyone to come with me if I decide to climb. This is my choice, my curiosity. You've all followed me this far, and I'm grateful for it. But this is different. This is walking into something we don't understand, following in the footsteps of men who never returned." "I'll go," Marcus said immediately. "I didn't come all this way to turn back now." "As did I," Rosa added, "though I think we're all fools for it." One by one, the others agreed. Not because they weren't afraid, Elena could see the fear in their eyes, but because they were loyal and curious, and because in the end, sailors are drawn to mysteries the way ships are drawn to harbour. "Then we'll do it tomorrow," Elena decided. "We'll return to the ship tonight, rest, provision properly for a climb, and in the morning we'll see what waits at the top of that mountain." They made their way back to the beach as the sun set, the journal safely tucked in Elena's pack. The morning star waited in the bay, her anchor light glowing warm and welcoming in the gathering dusk. As they rowed toward her, Elena looked back at the island. The mist was glowing now, lit from within by the last rays of sunlight, and for just a moment it looked like the entire island was breathing, swelling and contracting in that same slow, steady rhythm she had noticed before. And she could have sworn she heard it, faint and far away, carried on the evening breeze, the sound of singing. Women's voices, high and clear, singing in a language she didn't know. Beautiful and terrible, just as Captain Alvarez had written. That night, back aboard the Morning Star, Eleanor stood on deck long after the others had gone to sleep. She held the journal in her hands, reading it again by lantern light, trying to understand what had happened 53 years ago on that mist-shrouded island. The crew of the Esperanza had taken something they shouldn't have taken, a sacred idol stolen from people who had cursed them for the theft. They had been forced to seek shelter on this island, and here the curse had found them. Men had been drawn up the mountain by singing, by visions of a woman in white, by something that promised them, what? Company? Forgiveness? Peace? And Captain Alvarez had tried to make it right. He had taken the idol and gone to return it, to appease whatever power dwelt on those peaks. But he had never returned. None of them had. Elena thought about the dream she'd had, the woman in white looking out at the dark water, saying we never arrived. Had that been a dream? Or something else? Some connection she had made, reaching out across time and distance to the story that waited here? She didn't know. But she was certain of one thing. Tomorrow, when they climbed that mountain, they would find answers. Whether those answers brought peace or more questions, whether they finally laid the ghost of the Esperanza to rest, or became part of its mystery themselves, that remained to be seen. But Eleanor had never been one to turn away from an unfinished story. She closed the journal and looked up at the stars. They were brilliant tonight, undimmed by clouds or moon, stretching across the sky in rivers of light. The same stars that had guided sailors for thousands of years. The same stars that had watched over the Esperanza when she sailed these waters. The same stars that had seen whatever had happened on that mountain and kept the secret all these years. Tomorrow, Elena thought, tomorrow we'll ask the island for its secrets. And perhaps, if we're brave enough, if we're respectful enough, it will answer. From the island came another drift of song, so faint it might have been imagination, might have been the wind in the trees, might have been the voices of ghosts singing their endless vigil. Elena stood and listened until it faded, then went below to sleep and dream of mountains wrapped in mist and women in white dresses who had been waiting for someone to finally come and hear their story. Dawn came softly to the island, the sun rising through layers of mist that turned the morning light into something diffused and golden. Elena woke early, as she always did, and found that she wasn't the first on deck. Rosa stood at the rail, looking toward the island, a cup of coffee steaming in her hands. "Couldn't sleep?" Elena asked, joining her. "I slept," Rosa replied. But I dreamed, strange dreams of women singing, of mountains that moved like living things, of a ship with angel wings sailing through clouds instead of water." She paused, then turned to look at Elena. "You're certain about this? About going up there?" "I'm certain that I need to know," Elena said. "Whether that's the same as being certain about going, I'm not sure." Rosa smiled slightly. An honest answer, at least. She sipped her coffee, then added, "Whatever happens up there, we face it together. That's what you said. I'm holding you to that." "I wouldn't have it any other way." They provisioned for the climb carefully. Water in canteens, dried fruit and bread wrapped in cloth, rope and climbing gear in case the path grew treacherous. Elena brought the journal, thinking it might help them understand what they found. She also brought something else, a small silver compass that had belonged to her father, a talisman of sorts, something to help them find their way back. The landing party was the same as before: Eleanor, Rosa, Marcus, Thomas, Maria, and old Santos. 6 people, prepared as well as they could be for whatever waited on that mountain. They rowed ashore as the sun climbed higher, burning away some of the mist, but never quite dispelling it entirely. On the beach, they paused to look up at the peaks. From here, they seemed impossibly tall, though Eleanor knew that was partly an illusion created by the angle and the vegetation. "The journal said Captain Alvarez went to the highest peak," Marcus noted. "That one, I think." He pointed to the central peak, the tallest of the 3. "Then that's where we'll go," Elena said. They followed the same path as yesterday, past the waterfall and the carved symbol, through the old camp where the crew of the Esperanza had waited and worried and slowly succumbed to whatever power held this island. But this time, they didn't stop. They continued upward, following a trail that grew steeper and more overgrown the higher they climbed. The vegetation changed as they ascended. The palms and broad-leaf tropical plants of the lower slopes gave way to smaller trees with twisted trunks, then to low shrubs, and finally to bare rock scattered with hardy grasses. The mist grew thicker too, until they were climbing through a world of grey where visibility extended no more than 20 feet in any direction. Santos, who had been quiet during most of the climb, paused to catch his breath and looked around thoughtfully. "I've climbed mountains on a dozen islands," he said, "but I've never seen mist behave like this. It should burn off as the sun rises, or at least thin out. But here it stays, thick as wool, cool as evening." "Is it dangerous?" Marcus asked. "That depends," Santos replied, "on what's causing it." They climbed for another hour, the path growing steeper, requiring them to use their hands in places to pull themselves up over rocky outcrops. Elena's legs burned with the effort, and she could hear the others breathing hard behind her. But no one suggested stopping. No one suggested turning back. And then, quite suddenly, they emerged from the mist. It was like breaking through the surface of water into air. One moment they were surrounded by grey fog, and the next they stood on a narrow plateau, with clear sky above and the mist spreading below them like a sea of clouds. The sun was warm on Elena's face, and the air smelled different up here, cleaner somehow, sharper. The plateau was perhaps 30 feet across, a shelf of flat rock on the mountainside, and there, in the centre of the plateau, was something that made Eleanor's heart catch in her throat. A shrine. It was made of stone, carefully stacked and fitted together without mortar, weathered by time but still intact. The structure was circular, about 6 feet in diameter, with an opening facing east toward the rising sun. Inside the circle, Eleanor could see offerings, shells and flowers that looked impossibly fresh, as if they had been placed there hours ago rather than decades. And in the very centre, resting on a flat stone that served as an altar, was a small golden idol, the bird with outstretched wings that Captain Alvarez had written about. "There it is," Rosa breathed, "the cursed idol." They approached slowly, reverently. The idol was perhaps 6 inches tall, made of solid gold that gleamed in the sunlight. It was exquisitely crafted, every feather detailed, every curve and line perfect. The bird's wings were spread as if in flight, and its head was turned slightly to one side, as if looking at something just beyond vision. But it was the eyes that struck Elena most. They were made of some kind of green stone, jade perhaps, and they seemed to hold depth and intelligence. Looking at them, she felt the same sensation Captain Alvarez had described, the feeling of being watched, of being seen. "Someone put it here," Marcus said. "Captain Alvarez must have made it this far. He returned the idol to this shrine." "But he never came back down," Thomas added quietly. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the shrine, at the offerings, at the golden bird that had caused so much suffering. And then Elena noticed something else. Behind the shrine, carved into the rock face of the mountain, was an opening. Not a cave exactly, but a passage, tall and narrow, leading deeper into the peak. "Look," she said, pointing. They moved around the shrine carefully, not wanting to disturb anything. The passage was just wide enough for a person to walk through, and it led inward and upward, disappearing into darkness after a few feet. "Should we go in?" Marcus asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Elena pulled out her father's compass and checked their position. The needle spun lazily, as if uncertain which way was north. She frowned and shook it gently, but the needle continued its aimless wandering. "The compass doesn't work here," she said. "Some property of the rock, perhaps, or something else. Either way, if we go in there, we'll need to be very careful not to lose our bearings." "We could mark our path," Maria suggested. "Tie strips of cloth to mark where we've been." Eleanor nodded. It was a good idea. They tore strips from one of the spare cloths they'd brought, and Thomas tied the first one to a rock just inside the passage entrance. "Stay close," Elena said. "If anyone feels uncomfortable, if anything seems wrong, we stop immediately." "Understood." They agreed, and then, one by one, they entered the passage. Inside, the air was cool and still. The passage was indeed narrow. Elena could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. But it was tall enough to stand upright, and the floor, though rough, was walkable. Light filtered in from behind them, but it faded quickly as they moved deeper. Thomas lit a lantern he'd been carrying, and the warm glow pushed back the darkness. The passage walls were smooth in places, rough in others, and covered with the same kind of carvings they'd seen by the waterfall. Symbols and patterns that might have been writing, or might have been art, or might have been something else entirely. They walked for what felt like a long time, though Eleanor suspected it was only minutes. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes climbing steeply, sometimes levelling out. They marked their path diligently, tying cloth strips every 20 paces. And then the passage opened into a chamber. It was large, perhaps 50 feet across, and high-ceilinged with light filtering down from somewhere above. The walls were covered in carvings, more elaborate than any they'd seen before. And in the centre of the chamber, arranged in careful rows, were objects. Lots of objects. "Is this—" Marcus's voice trailed off in wonder. "The treasure of the Esperanza," Elena finished, "or at least part of it." There were chests filled with gold coins, their lids open as if someone had been examining the contents. There were silver plates and goblets stacked neatly. There were jewels, emeralds and rubies and pearls, arranged in small piles. But everything was dusty, untouched, as if it had been placed here long ago and forgotten. "Why would they bring the treasure here?" Thomas asked. "Why not keep it on the ship?" "Perhaps they thought it would be safer," Rosa suggested. "Or perhaps they were trying to appease whatever power they'd offended. Offerings, like the shells and flowers at the shrine." Elena walked slowly around the chamber, looking at everything but touching nothing. Something about this didn't feel right. The treasure was here, yes, but it felt more like a museum display than a hoard. It felt like something preserved, kept safe, waiting for someone. And then she saw them. On the far side of the chamber, sitting with their backs against the wall, were the remains of men. Their clothing had mostly rotted away, but Eleanor could see the remnants of Spanish naval uniforms, the tarnish of metal buttons, the curl of leather belts. There were perhaps a dozen of them, sitting peacefully, their skeletal hands resting in their laps. Captain Alvarez and his men. They had made it this far. They had brought the treasure here, and here they had stayed. But why? What had kept them here? Rosa saw them too, and crossed herself quietly. "May they rest in peace," she murmured. "Look at their faces," Marcus said softly. He had approached closer than the others, his young curiosity overcoming his fear. "They look peaceful, not frightened, not like they died in pain or terror." He was right. The skulls were turned slightly upward, as if looking at something, and their postures suggested not death by violence or starvation, but simply sitting down and never getting back up. Elena was about to respond when she heard it. The singing. It came from above, from wherever that light was filtering down. Women's voices, high and clear, singing in a language that felt ancient. The song was beautiful, haunting and lovely, and sad all at once. It spoke of loneliness and waiting, of time passing like water, of a vigil kept through countless sunrises and sunsets. And Elena understood, suddenly and completely, what had happened to Captain Alvarez and his men. They had heard this song. They had followed it up, higher into the mountains, and they had found whatever, whoever was singing. And in finding it, they had made a choice to stay, to keep company with whatever lonely spirit dwelt on this peak, to give her what she wanted most, not treasure, not gold, but presence, companionship, the knowledge that she was not alone. "We need to keep going," Elena said quietly. "We need to go up there. We need to see." "Captain," Rosa said, and there was warning in her voice, "those men never came back down." "I know," Elena replied, "but I don't think they were trapped. I think they chose to stay, and we need to know why. We need to see what they saw." She looked at each of her companions. "But I won't ask you to come with me. This is my choice. If you want to wait here or go back to the ship, I understand. No one will think less of you." There was a long moment of silence, broken only by the distant singing. Then Marcus stepped forward. "I'm coming with you." "As am I," Rosa said, though she sighed as if resigning herself to foolishness. One by one the others agreed. They had come this far together. They would see it through together. The passage leading upward was easier to find once they knew to look for it. A natural chimney in the rock, wide enough to climb, but requiring careful attention to handholds and footholds. Thomas went first, testing each hold before committing his weight. Then Marcus, then Maria, then Santos, then Rosa. Eleanor came last, making sure everyone got up safely. The climb took perhaps 15 minutes, and then they emerged onto the peak itself. The summit of the mountain was flat, worn smooth by wind and weather. The mist was far below them now, and they stood in brilliant sunlight, with views stretching in all directions, the Caribbean Sea sparkling blue and endless, the other islands of the Windward Archipelago scattered like jewels, the curve of the horizon bending gently away. And there, in the centre of the summit, was a woman. She stood with her back to them, wearing a white dress that moved in a wind Eleanor couldn't feel. Her hair was long and dark, flowing down her back. She was looking out at the sea, at the horizon, at something distant, and she was singing. The song was the same one they'd heard below, but up here it was clearer, more powerful. It spoke of the sea and the sky, of ships and sailors, of journeys taken and never completed. It spoke of hope and patience and an eternal waiting. Elena stepped forward slowly, her heart beating hard in her chest.
Find me here.
"Hello," she said softly. The woman stopped singing. She turned, and Elena saw her face clearly for the first time. She was beautiful, impossibly so, with features that seemed neither entirely human nor entirely something else. Her skin was bronze, her eyes the colour of deep water, and when she looked at Elena, there was recognition in her gaze, as if she had been expecting this meeting, as if she had been waiting for it. "You came," the woman said, and her voice was like music, like water over stones, like wind through leaves. Finally, someone came looking. Eleanor found her voice. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, and it was sad and lovely at once. "I have had many names," she said. "The people who built the shrine called me guardian. The Spanish called me spirit. But names are less important than purpose. I guard this place. I have always guarded this place. Since before ships sailed these waters, since before your kind came to these islands, I guard what sleeps below." "The golden idol?" Marcus asked. "No," the woman said. "That was merely a key, a symbol of respect from people who understood that some places should not be disturbed. When your captain's people took it, they opened a door that should have remained closed. They created an imbalance." "What sleeps below?" Elena asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. The woman looked at her for a long moment. "Something old," she said finally. "Something from the time before time. Something that must remain sleeping, or your world would change in ways you cannot imagine. The people who lived here before knew this. They built the shrine. They left offerings. They respected the boundary." "But the Spanish took the idol," Rosa said. "They broke the balance." "They did," the woman agreed. "And so I called to them. I sang to them. I showed them what was at stake. And your Captain Alvarez, to his credit, understood. He brought the idol back. He restored the balance. And then he and his men chose to stay, to help me guard this place, to ensure that no one else would disturb what sleeps below." "They died here," Elena said quietly. "They gave themselves here," the woman corrected gently. "There is a difference. They were not prisoners. They could have left at any time. But they understood the importance of the vigil, and they chose to remain. Their spirits are at peace, honoured and remembered." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was the sadness in the woman's voice. Perhaps it was the thought of those men making such a choice. Perhaps it was simply the strangeness and beauty of this entire encounter. "The Esperanza," she said. "What happened to the ship?" The woman's expression grew even sadder. "The men who sailed her away, they were marked by what happened here. The imbalance had touched them. They sailed for a week trying to reach safe harbour. But the sea did not want them. They were caught in a storm, and the ship was driven onto rocks. She sank in deep water, taking the remaining treasure with her. The survivors made it to shore, but they carried the memory of this place with them always." "So the Esperanza truly is a ghost ship," Marcus said quietly. "In a way," the woman agreed. "Her story ended, but it ended incomplete, unresolved. That is why she appears in tales and dreams, why sailors glimpse her in mist and moonlight, because some part of her still seeks the harbour she never reached."
Elena took a deep breath. "Why did you let us come here? Why did you let us find this place?" The woman smiled. "Because you came seeking truth, not treasure. Because you read Captain Alvarez's journal and understood his sacrifice. Because I have been alone for a very long time, with only the spirits of dead men for company, and I wanted someone of the living world to know the story, to carry it back, to remember." "And the treasure?" Thomas asked. "What happens to that?" "It stays where it is," the woman said firmly. "It is part of the offering now, part of the balance. Take it and the imbalance returns. Leave it and all remains as it should be." Elena nodded slowly. She had expected this somehow. The treasure had never been the point. The story was the treasure. The understanding was the wealth worth carrying back. "Will you let us leave?" Rosa asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. The woman looked at her with those deep water eyes. "Of course," she said, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "You came here freely, with respect and curiosity. You sought to understand, not to take. Why would I keep you? You are welcome to go, to return to your ship, to sail wherever the wind carries you." She paused. "But I ask one thing of you." "What?" Elena asked. "Remember this story. Tell it to those who will listen. Let people know that the Esperanza found her purpose in the end, that her captain and crew died with honor, that some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be respected." "We will," Elena promised. "We'll remember. We'll tell the story." The woman nodded, satisfied. Then she turned back to look at the horizon, at the endless blue sea. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Thank you for seeing me, for hearing my song. It has been so very long since I spoke with anyone who could answer back." Elena wanted to say something more, wanted to ask 1,000 other questions. But she understood that the time for questions had passed. This meeting, strange and wonderful as it was, had reached its natural end. "Come," she said to her companions. "Let's go home." They climbed back down through the passage, past the chamber where Captain Alvarez and his men sat in their eternal vigil, past the shrine with its golden idol gleaming in the sunlight. They descended through the mist and the forest, following their cloth markers back to the beach where the Morning Star's boat waited. The sun was setting as they rowed back to the ship, painting the sky in colors of amber and rose, the same colors Elena had seen the night she found the bottle with the map. As if the story had come full circle. That night, with the Morning Star sailing away from the island on a gentle evening breeze, Elena stood at the helm and watched the three peaks disappear into the distance. The mist was thick around them now, glowing in the last light of day, and she thought she could hear, very faintly, the sound of singing following them across the water.
Whispers on the wind, a solemn hymn. Voices rise like dawn's first light. In shadows deep where silence dwells, a lonely heart begins to tell of waiting through the endless days. Time flows like rivers, never stays. High and clear, the voices sing, ancient words on timeless wings, haunting echoes, soft and grand, lonely vigils in the sand. Sunrise paints the sky anew, sunset fades to twilight's hue. Countless moments still I stand, holding faith with outstretched hand. High and clear, the voices sing, ancient words on timeless wings, haunting echoes, soft and grand, lonely vigils in the sand. Through the ages, through the tears, songs of love and endless years, a beauty born from sorrow's flame, whispered names, remembered names. Voices fade into the night, leaving traces of their light, a vigil kept forever near. In every song you'll find me here.
A farewell, a blessing, a thank you for remembering. And Elena knew that she would remember. They all would. The story of the Esperanza and her crew, of the guardian who waited on the mountain, of the balance that must be maintained and the price that some are willing to pay to maintain it. It was a treasure worth more than gold. A story worth more than jewels. And they would carry it with them, across all the seas they sailed, for the rest of their days. The Morning Star sailed westward with the dawn, leaving the Windward Isles behind. The crew was quiet that first day, each person lost in their own thoughts about what they had seen and experienced on the mountain. Elena had gathered everyone on deck the previous evening and told the full story to those who had remained with the ship. Now they all knew the truth of the Esperanza, and it weighed on them, not heavily, but significantly, like a trust they'd been given to carry. The weather was fair, the wind steady from the east. They made good progress through waters that now felt familiar, even though they had sailed this route only days before. Elena stood at the helm, enjoying the feel of the sun on her face and the ship responding to her touch. For the first time since finding the bottle, she felt at peace. The mystery had been solved, the story understood. They could return to their regular work now, trading, salvaging, living the life of honest sailors. It was late afternoon on the second day when Marcus, who had taken to spending long hours in the crow's nest since their adventure, called down in a voice that carried urgency. "Sail. Off the starboard bow." Elena immediately reached for her spyglass and scanned the horizon. There, perhaps 3 miles distant, was indeed a ship. Even at this distance, she could see it was larger than the Morning Star, a brigantine, she thought, with 2 masts and a full spread of canvas. "Can you make out her colors?" Elena called up to Marcus. There was a pause as the boy adjusted his position for a better view. "No colors flying, Captain. But her sails. Captain, her sails are black." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Black sails in these waters meant only one thing, a pirate vessel. And not the romanticized pirates of stories, but the real thing. Men who took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. Rosa was beside her in moments. "It'd be the Revenge," she said quietly. "I've heard tell of a brigantine with black sails working these waters. Her captain is a man named Garrett Blackwood. They say he's ruthless but clever, prefers to intimidate merchant ships into surrendering rather than fight, but won't hesitate to use violence if cost." "Have they seen us?" Elena asked. Rosa lifted her own spyglass. "I think so. They are changing course. Coming toward us." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. The Morning Star was fast, but could they outrun a larger ship with more sail? Perhaps, if they had enough of a head start. But they were in open water with nowhere to hide, and the wind favored both vessels equally. "All hands." Elena called. "Prepare to come about. We're going to run." The crew sprang into action, moving with the practiced efficiency of sailors who trusted their captain and each other. Sails were adjusted, the helm was brought around, and the Morning Star turned her bow north, away from the approaching ship. For an hour, they sailed hard, coaxing every bit of speed from their vessel. Elena stood at the helm, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes checking the sails, the wind, the pursuing ship. The Morning Star was indeed fast. They were holding the distance, perhaps even gaining slightly. But then the wind shifted. It was subtle at first, a change in pressure, a different feel to the air. And then the wind that had been blowing steady from the east began to swing around, coming now from the north. The direction they were trying to sail toward. "They are lucky devils," Thomas muttered, adjusting the sails to compensate. "Or we unlucky." "Could be neither," old Santos said, his weathered face thoughtful as he looked at the sky. "Could be they know these waters better than we do. Know how the winds shift in the afternoon." Elena made a decision. "We can't outrun them in this wind. And we can't outfight them. They'll have 3 times our crew, at least. So we use our wits instead." She turned to Rosa. "How much of the trade goods do we have left?" 3 barrels of rum, some textiles, the ironwork we were going to sell in Barbados." "Why?" "Because," Elena said, "we're going to give Captain Blackwood what he wants. Or at least, make him think we are." She quickly outlined her plan. It was risky, relying on psychology and timing rather than force or speed. But it was the best chance they had. 20 minutes later, when the brigantine had closed to within a quarter mile, Elena ordered the Morning Star to heave to stop sailing and wait. It was a gesture of surrender, of acknowledging that they had been caught. The brigantine approached cautiously, as well she might. Even surrendering ships could be dangerous if they grew desperate. She came alongside, and Elena could now see her clearly. The Revenge she was called, painted in gold letters on her black hull. Her crew lined the rails, perhaps 30 men, all armed with cutlasses and pistols. They looked rough and dangerous, exactly what Elena had expected. A man stood at the rail of the Revenge, and Elena knew immediately this was Captain Blackwood. He was tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back in a queue and a face that might have been handsome if not for the hardness in his eyes and the cruel set to his mouth. He wore a long coat of dark blue wool despite the heat, and a brace of pistols crossed his chest. Captain of the Morning Star, he called across the water between the ships. His voice was educated, refined even, not what Elena had expected from a pirate. I am Captain Garrett Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I wasn't aware we had met, Elena called back, keeping her voice steady and calm. We haven't had that pleasure, Blackwood replied. But I've been tracking a certain map. A map in a bottle that was meant to reach me, not some salvager playing at adventure. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You found the Esperanza, didn't you? Or at least, you found the island. Elena's mind worked quickly. This man knew about the map, which meant he had been searching for it, or for what it led to. The treasure of the Esperanza. He didn't know they'd left it behind. He thought they had it aboard. We found the island, Elena admitted. There was no point in lying about something he clearly already knew. And the treasure. There was treasure there, yes. Blackwood's eyes gleamed. Then you'll understand why I need to come aboard and inspect your cargo. Nothing personal, you understand. Simply business. I understand perfectly, Elena said, but I have a counter-proposal. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Captain. Perhaps not, Elena agreed. But hear me out. You're looking for treasure. We have cargo, trade goods worth a fair amount of money. Take the cargo, let us sail away, and everyone comes out ahead. You get value, we keep our ship and our lives, no violence necessary. But not the Esperanza's treasure, Blackwood said, which is what I really want. The treasure from that island, Elena said carefully, choosing her words with precision, belongs to the island. Taking it would be unwise, dangerous, even. There are reasons it stayed there for 50 years. Blackwood laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. Superstition, curses and ghost stories. I had hoped you were more practical than that, Captain. Very well. Since you seem disinclined to cooperate voluntarily, we'll board your vessel and see for ourselves what you're carrying. Men, prepare to wait. Elena called. She had been watching the sky while they talked, and now she saw what she'd been hoping for. Look to the south, Captain Blackwood. The wind is about to change again. Blackwood paused, irritated by the interruption, but something in Elena's voice made him turn and look. And indeed, on the southern horizon, she could see the dark line of a squall approaching, not a major storm, but significant enough to make sailing difficult and potentially dangerous if one wasn't prepared. That squall will be here in less than an hour, Elena said, and you're on the wrong side of it. If you want to maintain your position, you'll need to adjust now. Or you can waste time boarding my ship, searching for treasure that isn't here, and then find yourself caught in rough seas with no safe harbor nearby. Blackwood studied the approaching squall, then looked back at Elena with narrowed eyes. You're a clever woman, I'll give you that. But you're also playing a dangerous game. I could board your ship anyway, take everything you have, and still outrun that squall. You could try, Elena agreed. But is it worth the time? The risk? We're offering you our cargo freely. 3 barrels of fine Caribbean rum, quality textiles, well-made ironwork. It's not the fortune of the Esperanza, but it's honest value. And you get it without a fight, without damage to your ship or loss of your men. For a long moment, Blackwood said nothing. Elena could see him calculating, weighing options. Finally, he smiled, a real smile this time, though still edged with something dangerous. You have steel in you, Captain. I respect that. Very well. Transfer your cargo to my ship. Do it quickly and peacefully, and we'll part as, well, not friends, but not enemies either. The next half hour was tense. Elena's crew worked to transfer the barrels and crates from the Morning Star to the Revenge, using ropes and pulleys to move everything across the gap between the ships. Blackwood's men watched carefully, hands never far from their weapons. But true to his word, Blackwood allowed no violence, no theft beyond what had been agreed upon. As the last barrel was transferred, Blackwood called across one more time. "This isn't over, Captain Cortez." So he knew her name, he had done his research. "Next time we meet, I may not be so generous." "Then let us hope we don't meet again, Captain Blackwood," Elena replied. The Revenge cast off, her black sails filling with wind as she turned south, racing to get ahead of the squall. Elena immediately ordered the Morning Star to come about, heading northwest, away from both the pirate ship and the weather. As they sailed away, Rosa came to stand beside Elena at the helm. "That was well done," she said quietly. "You gave him what he wanted, or enough of it, without giving him everything." "And without him knowing there was never anything to give," Elena replied. "The treasure is still on the island, guarded by its spirit. As it should be." "Do you think he believed you? About the danger of taking it?" Elena shrugged. "Probably not. Men like Blackwood rarely believe in things they can't see or touch. But if he goes to that island looking for treasure, he'll learn. The Guardian will teach him, one way or another." That night, as the Morning Star sailed under stars bright and clear, the squall having passed well to the south, Elena sat in her cabin with the journal of Captain Alvarez. She had kept it, this record of events, this piece of history. It felt important to preserve it, to ensure the story wouldn't be lost. She opened to a blank page near the end and began to write, adding her own entry to the captain's account. 20 December, 1795. 53 years after Captain Alvarez climbed the mountain, we returned to the island. We found his journal. We followed his path. We learned the truth of the Esperanza and understood the sacrifice her crew made. The treasure remains where it should be, guarded by one who has kept vigil for story forward, as she asked. May those who read this understand, some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be respected. Some treasures are not meant to be taken but to be left in peace. She signed it with her name and closed the journal carefully. Tomorrow they would reach familiar waters. In a few days, they would be back in San Sebastian, back to their normal lives. But they would carry this story with them always, this strange and beautiful encounter with something beyond the ordinary world. And if Captain Blackwood tried to claim the treasure they had left behind, well, the Guardian would deal with him as she saw fit. Elena had no doubt of that. The Morning Star sailed on through the peaceful night, her crew sleeping soundly, her captain at peace with the choices she had made. Behind them, the Windward Isles grew distant and small. Ahead, the vast Caribbean spread out like a promise, full of new journeys, new stories, new mysteries yet to be discovered. But for now, this story, the story of the Esperanza and her eternal vigil, was complete. And it was enough. 3 days after their encounter with the Revenge, the Morning Star sailed into the harbor at San Sebastian. The familiar sight of the port, its colorful buildings climbing the hillside, its busy docks crowded with ships and sailors, filled Elena with a quiet satisfaction. They were home, safe and sound, with a story that would stay with them forever. But as they made their way to their usual berth, Elena noticed something unusual. There was a buzz of activity on the docks, groups of sailors clustered together talking in urgent voices, harbormaster's men moving with unusual purpose. As soon as they were tied up, Rosa went to gather news while Elena supervised the securing of the ship. When her first mate returned, her expression was troubled. "There's talk all over the harbor," Rosa said quietly, "about a ship that came in yesterday, a merchant vessel called the Sea Rose. She barely made it to port, half her crew sick or mad, the captain raving about black sails and a cursed island." Elena's stomach tightened. The Revenge. That's what they are saying. Apparently Captain Blackwood took our cargo and then immediately set course for the Windward Isles. He must have had the coordinates somehow, or followed our wake. The Sea Rose was in the area and witnessed what happened from a distance. What did happen? Rosa glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then continued. According to the Sea Rose's captain, the Revenge anchored in a bay on one of the islands. Sounds like the same longer than any mortal could imagine. We carry the one we found. Blackwood took most of his crew ashore. They were gone for a day and a night. When they came back. She paused. When they came back, something was wrong. Wrong how? The crew was singing. All of them, together, in voices that didn't sound quite human. They sailed the Revenge away from the island, but they didn't sail for any port. They just kept going, heading east into the open ocean. The Sea Rose tried to hail them, but got no response. Just that singing, carrying across the water. And then they saw something else, something that made the captain order his ship to run. What did they see? Elena asked, though she thought she already knew. They saw the Revenge sail into a bank of mist that shouldn't have been there. And in the mist, they saw another ship keeping pace with it. A larger ship, old-fashioned, with high sails and a figurehead of an angel. The captain of the Sea Rose swears it was a ghost ship. His crew started to feel strange, drawn to follow the singing. So he turned and ran, and didn't stop until he reached this port. Elena closed her eyes for a moment. She could see it so clearly, Captain Blackwood, greedy and disbelieving, climbing that mountain despite all warnings. Finding the shrine, perhaps even finding the treasure chamber where Captain Alvarez and his men still kept their vigil. And then going higher still, drawn by the singing, drawn by the Guardian's voice. But unlike Captain Alvarez, who had come in humility and respect, Blackwood would have come with arrogance and greed. He would have demanded, not requested. He would have tried to take, not understanding that some things cannot be taken. And the Guardian, lonely but not desperate, patient but not passive, would have given him a choice. The same choice she had given Alvarez's men. Stay and keep the vigil. Join the eternal guardians of the sleeping thing below the mountain. Or refuse and face the consequences of disturbing sacred ground. What had Blackwood chosen? Had he stayed willingly? Or had the Guardian, tired of his disrespect, simply claimed him and his crew? Elena suspected it was somewhere in between, that Blackwood had been given the same offer as everyone else, and in his arrogance had tried to refuse, only to find that refusal was no longer an option once you stood on that mountain top. The Esperanza was there, Elena said softly. Or her ghost. She's found new sailors to accompany her on her eternal voyage. That's madness, Rosa said, but her voice lacked conviction. They had both seen too much to dismiss such things out of hand. Is it? Elena asked. Think about it. The Guardian said the Esperanza never reached her destination, but her story was incomplete. Perhaps now, with Blackwood and his crew, she has the complement she needs. Perhaps now she can finally complete her journey, even if it's a journey that never ends. That evening, Elena walked through the streets of San Sebastian, enjoying the solid feel of cobblestones under her feet, the sounds of normal life all around her. She stopped at a small church near the waterfront, one she had passed 100 times but rarely entered. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of candle wax and old wood. A few people sat in the pews, praying quietly. Elena lit a candle and placed it among the others, their flames flickering in the dim light. She said a prayer for Captain Alvarez and his men, who had chosen sacrifice over safety. A prayer for the Guardian, keeping her lonely vigil. A prayer for Captain Blackwood and his crew, who had learned too late that some treasures come with prices too high to pay. And a prayer for the Esperanza, that wherever she sailed now, through mist and dream, through the spaces between the real and the remembered, she would finally find the peace she had been seeking for 53 years. As Elena left the church and walked back toward the docks, she found Marcus waiting for her. The young man had been unusually quiet since their return, and Elena had been meaning to check on him. "Captain," he said, "I've been thinking about what happened. About Captain Blackwood. And did we send him to that fate? By telling him about the island? By not warning him properly?" Elena considered the question carefully. It was a fair one, and it deserved an honest answer. "I warned him," she said. "I told him the treasure was dangerous, that it belonged to the island. But he chose not to believe me. He chose greed over caution. We can guide people, Marcus, but we can't make their choices for them." But if we'd told him everything, about the Guardian, about what really happened to Captain Alvarez, would he have believed us? Elena interrupted gently. "Men like Blackwood don't believe in things they can't see or control. If we'd told him about the Guardian, he would have laughed at us. Or worse, he would have gone anyway, determined to prove us wrong. Some people have to learn their own lessons." Marcus nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right. It's just, I keep thinking about those men on the Revenge. They didn't all choose to follow Blackwood. Some were probably just crew, doing what they were paid to do." "You're right," Elena said. "And that's the tragedy of it. But remember what the Guardian said, she doesn't trap people. She offers them a choice. Even Blackwood's men, even now, have made their choice. Perhaps they found something up on that mountain that made them want to stay. Perhaps they understood the importance of the vigil in a way their captain never could. Or perhaps they had no choice at all, Marcus said quietly. Perhaps, Elena agreed. We'll never know for certain. But Marcus, and this is important, we can't carry the weight of every bad decision made by others. We acted with honor. We respected the Guardian and the island. We left the treasure untouched. What Blackwood did after that was his choice, not ours. The young man seemed to take some comfort from this. Thank you, Captain, for explaining it, for helping me understand. That's what we do on the Morning Star, Elena said with a small smile. We try to understand. We try to respect. We try to leave places better than we found them, or at least no worse. That's all anyone can do. The next morning brought news that confirmed what Rosa had heard. The harbor master issued a warning to all ships. A dangerous fogbank had been reported in the Windward Isles, appearing and disappearing without pattern. Several ships had reported seeing a brigantine with black sails and an old Spanish galleon sailing together through the mist, both ships crewed by figures that sang in unearthly voices. All vessels were advised to avoid the area. Elena read the notice and felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for Blackwood and his crew, whatever their fate had been. Satisfaction that the Guardian's vigil would continue, that the sleeping thing beneath the mountain would remain undisturbed. And a quiet certainty that the story of the Esperanza would continue to be told, growing with each telling, becoming legend. Over the next few weeks, the Morning Star returned to her regular work. They took on cargo, made deliveries to various ports, salvaged a small wreck that had nothing mysterious about it, just an old merchant ship that had run aground in a storm. Life returned to normal, or as normal as life ever was for sailors in the Caribbean. But Elena noticed something. The crew of the Morning Star had changed, in subtle ways. They were more thoughtful, more careful. When they saw other ships in distress, they went to help without being asked. When they dealt with merchants or other sailors, they did so with more respect, more awareness that every person carried their own story. And in the evenings, when the work was done and they sat on deck enjoying the cool air, they would sometimes talk about what they had seen on that island. Not boasting or exaggerating, but simply remembering. Keeping the story alive. Honoring the choice that Captain Alvarez and his men had made. One night, perhaps a month after their return, Elena dreamed again. She stood on the deck of a ship, not the Morning Star, but something larger, older. The Esperanza, she realized. But this time the ship wasn't empty or ghostly. It was full of people. Captain Alvarez stood at the helm, looking peaceful and content. His crew worked the rigging, singing as they did so. And beside them, working alongside them, were the men from the Revenge, including Captain Blackwood. But Blackwood looked different. The hardness was gone from his eyes, the cruelty from his mouth. He looked younger somehow, unburdened. He saw Elena and nodded to her, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. Understanding, perhaps. Acceptance. And then the woman in white appeared, standing at the bow of the ship, looking out at a horizon that seemed to shimmer between sea and sky, between the real and the eternal. She turned and smiled at Elena, a real smile this time, warm and grateful. Thank you, she said, though her lips didn't move. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for understanding. The vigil continues, but now there are more to share it. And the Esperanza sails on. Elena woke to find the sun streaming through her cabin window, the Morning Star rocking gently at anchor in San Sebastian harbor. For a moment, she lay still, holding on to the dream, feeling its peace and rightness settle into her bones. Then she rose and went on deck, ready for whatever the new day would bring. The sea was vast and full of mysteries. Some were meant to be solved. Others were meant to be respected, honored, and remembered. Elena had learned to tell the difference. And in learning that, she had found something more valuable than any treasure. Wisdom, earned through experience and tempered with compassion. The story of the Esperanza was finished. Or rather, it had found its proper ending, the one it had been seeking for 53 years. The ghost ship had her crew, the Guardian had her companions, and the sleeping thing beneath the mountain remained safely undisturbed. And Captain Elena Cortez had a story to tell, a story she would share with anyone who would listen, so that others might learn what she had learned, that the greatest treasures are not always the ones you take home, but the ones you leave behind, safe and honored, exactly where they belong. 3 months had passed since the Morning Star had returned from the Windward Isles. 3 months of ordinary sailing, ordinary cargo runs, ordinary days under the Caribbean sun. But Elena found that ordinary felt different now. Richer somehow. More meaningful. She was sitting in a tavern near the docks of San Sebastian, a place where sailors gathered to share stories and news. The air was thick with pipe smoke and the smell of rum, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled the room. Elena sat with Rosa and Marcus at a corner table, listening to an old sailor tell a tale about a sea monster he claimed to have seen off the coast of Jamaica. Big as a whale, it was. The old man was saying, his weathered hands gesturing expansively, with tentacles long enough to wrap around a ship twice over. We barely escaped with our lives. The gathered sailors responded with appreciative murmurs, though Elena suspected most of them, like her, knew the story was at least half exaggeration. But that was the nature of sailors' tales. They grew with the telling, becoming more dramatic, more memorable, more worthy of being passed along. When the old sailor finished, there was a moment of companionable silence. Then someone called out, "What about you, Captain Cortez? You've been quiet tonight. Surely you've got a story worth sharing." Elena smiled and shook her head. "My stories are far less exciting than sea monsters, I'm afraid." "Come now," another voice said. "We've heard rumors about a mysterious voyage you took a few months back. About the Esperanza." The tavern grew quieter. Elena could feel the attention shifting to her, curious and expectant. She glanced at Rosa, who gave her a small nod. They had agreed that the story should be shared, not the complete truth, perhaps, but a version of it that would honor what they had experienced while keeping the island's deepest secret safe. Elena took a sip of her drink and began. "Very well," she said. "But this isn't a story about sea monsters or buried gold. It's a story about a ship that got lost, and a crew that found their way home in an unexpected manner." She told them about finding the bottle with the map, about sailing to the Windward Isles and discovering the island that matched the map's description. She told them about Captain Alvarez's journal, about the cursed idol that had been taken from a temple, about the captain's attempt to make things right. She left out the Guardian, or rather, she changed her into something vaguer, more folkloric. "The local legends say the island is protected by spirits," she said. "Ancient guardians who watch over sacred places. Whether that's true or just superstition, I can't say for certain. But what I can say is that the Esperanza's treasure is still there, untouched, and will likely remain so." She told them about Captain Blackwood, about his greed and his fate. The last anyone saw of the Revenge, she was sailing east with the Esperanza, both ships crewed by men who sang in voices that carried across the water. Some say they accursed. Others say they found something they were looking for. Either way, they haven't been seen in any civilized port since. When she finished, the tavern was silent. Then, slowly, the conversations resumed, but quieter now, more thoughtful. Elena had given them a story that would be retold, she knew. It would grow and change with each telling, but the core of it would remain, that some mysteries were better left unsolved, some treasures better left unclaimed. An old woman who had been sitting in the corner, listening quietly, approached Elena's table. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes sharp and knowing. She reminded Elena, in some indefinable way, of the Guardian. "That was well told, Captain," the woman said. "You have the gift of knowing which stories to keep and which to share." "Thank you," Elena replied. The woman leaned closer, her voice dropping. "I knew a woman once, many years ago, who sailed to an island in the Windward Chain. She went looking for her brother, who had been part of the Esperanza's crew. She never found him, but she came back changed. Peaceful, she said. She told me he had found his purpose, his place. That he was exactly where he needed to be." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. When was this? Oh, 30 years ago now. Maybe more. She's long dead, that woman. But she told me that if I ever met someone who had been to that island, I should pass along a message. The old woman smiled. She said to tell them, "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for seeing. Thank you for understanding that not all endings look like endings." Before Elena could respond, the woman patted her hand and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Elena looked at Rosa, who had heard the exchange. "Did that just happen?" Rosa asked. "I think so," Elena replied. though she felt as if she had stepped briefly into a dream. I think the island has many stories. Many people who've been touched by it over the years. And they're all connected, somehow. That night, lying in her hammock aboard the Morning Star, Elena thought about stories and their power. About how they connected people across time and distance. About how a story well told could carry truth even when the facts were changed or simplified. About how the act of remembering, of bearing witness, was itself a kind of honor, a kind of gift. She thought about Captain Alvarez, who had written his journal so that someone, someday, would understand what had happened. She thought about the Guardian, who had asked only to be remembered, to have her vigil acknowledged. She thought about Captain Blackwood, who had learned too late that some things were bigger than individual ambition. And she thought about herself, about the choice she had made to climb that mountain, to seek understanding rather than treasure. It had changed her, that choice. Had changed all of them. They carried it with them now, a kind of wisdom earned through experience. The next morning brought a visitor. Elena was on deck, overseeing the loading of supplies for their next voyage, when a well-dressed man approached along the dock. He was middle-aged, with an air of education and prosperity about him. "Captain Cortez," he asked politely. "I am. How can I help you?" The man glanced around, then lowered his voice. "My name is Professor Miguel Santos. I'm a historian, specializing in Spanish colonial history and indigenous cultures of the Caribbean. I heard your story last night. I was in the tavern, though I don't think you noticed me. I wonder if I might speak with you privately." Elena considered, then nodded. "Come aboard." In her cabin, Santos got straight to the point. "I've been researching the Esperanza for years," he said. "Trying to understand what happened to her, why she vanished. Your story, even the version you told in the tavern, fills in many gaps. But I sense there's more. Things you didn't say publicly." Elena studied him carefully. He seemed sincere, genuinely interested in understanding rather than exploiting. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked. "Because Captain Diego Alvarez de la Vega was my great-great-grandfather," Santos replied quietly. "I've grown up with the family shame of his failure, the loss of the ship and the treasure. But I've always believed there was more to the story. That he wasn't a failure or a coward, as some have painted him. Your story suggests I was right." Elena felt something shift in her chest. This man was family to the captain whose journal she carried. Family who deserved to know the truth. She pulled out the journal and handed it to him. "This belonged to your ancestor," she said. "He wrote it on the island, documenting what happened. I've added my own entry at the end. Perhaps it will give you the answers you're seeking." Santos took the journal with trembling hands and opened it carefully. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting of his ancestor, and Elena saw tears begin to form. This is incredible. Do you know what this means? This clears his name. It shows he acted with honor, with courage. He tried to make things right." "He did more than try," Elena said gently. "He succeeded. The balance was restored. The island is protected. Your great-great-grandfather gave his life to ensure that something dangerous remained safely contained. That's not failure. That's sacrifice. That's heroism." Santos looked up at her, tears now flowing freely down his face. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for bringing this back. For understanding what he did. For honoring his memory." "Keep the journal," Elena said. "It belongs with his family. Let his story be known, the true story. Let people understand that Captain Alvarez was a man of honor who made the hardest choice a captain can make." Santos clutched the journal to his chest. "I'll write about this. I'll make sure his story is told properly, in academic circles and beyond. The world should know." After he left, Elena felt lighter somehow. The journal had been a weight she was carrying, and now it had found its proper home. The story would continue to spread, to be told and retold. But now it had a keeper, someone whose personal stake in the truth would ensure it wasn't lost or distorted beyond recognition. Over the following weeks, Elena noticed changes, both in herself and in how others saw her. Word had spread about her voyage to the Windward Isles, about her encounter with the Esperanza's mystery. Other sailors treated her with a new kind of respect, not just as a capable captain but as someone who had seen beyond the ordinary world and returned with wisdom. Young sailors would sometimes approach her, asking questions. Not about treasure or adventure, but about how to know when to pursue a mystery and when to leave it alone. About how to balance curiosity with respect. About what it meant to be a good sailor versus just a skilled one. Elena found herself becoming something she had never intended, a teacher, a mentor, someone who could help others navigate not just the physical waters of the Caribbean, but the more complicated waters of ethics and honor and purpose. Rosa teased her about it one evening. "You're becoming wise in your old age, Captain." "I'm 32, Elena protested with a laugh. "Hardly old." "Wise, then, which might be even more dangerous for someone who makes their living from adventure." "Perhaps," Elena agreed, "but perhaps there are different kinds of adventure. The adventure of understanding, the adventure of connection, the adventure of helping others find their way." "Listen to you," Rosa said, but her tone was affectionate. "Next you'll be writing books and giving lectures." "Maybe I will," Elena said thoughtfully. "Maybe that's not such a bad idea. Stories have power, Rosa. The right story, told the right way, can change how people see the world. Can make them more thoughtful, more careful, more aware that their actions have consequences beyond what they can immediately see." "The Guardian would be proud," Rosa said softly. Elena smiled. "I hope so. I'd like to think we're honoring her request. Remembering, sharing, making sure her vigil and Captain Alvarez's sacrifice meant something." One evening, perhaps 6 months after their return from the Windward Isles, Elena stood at the helm of the Morning Star as they sailed out of San Sebastian harbor for yet another voyage. The sun was setting, painting the sky in familiar shades of amber and rose. The wind was warm and steady. The crew was in good spirits, singing one of their old sailing songs. Marcus came to stand beside her, no longer quite the boy he had been when they'd started this journey. "Captain," he said, "I've been thinking about what we found on that island, about the Guardian and the vigil and all of it. And I understand now why you wanted to go, why you needed to see it through. It wasn't about the treasure. It was never about the treasure." "No," Elena agreed. "It was about finishing a story that had been left unfinished. About honoring people who deserve to be honored. About understanding that the world is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than we usually give it credit for. I want to be the kind of sailor who understands that," Marcus said earnestly, "who seeks truth more than treasure, who respects mysteries even while trying to understand them." Elena put a hand on his shoulder. "Then you will be," she said. "You already are. You just needed to learn to trust that instinct." As they sailed into the gathering dusk, Elena thought about all the journeys she had taken, all the mysteries she had encountered. Some she had solved, others she had left alone, but all of them had taught her something, had shaped her into who she was becoming. The Esperanza was behind them now, her story told and understood. But ahead lay countless other stories, other mysteries, other chances to choose wisdom over greed, understanding over exploitation, honor over profit. The sea was vast and full of wonders. And Elena Cortez, captain of the Morning Star, sailor of the Caribbean, keeper of stories and seeker of truth, was exactly where she belonged, on the water, under the stars, with a good crew and a clear conscience and the wind carrying them forward into whatever came next. Some treasures, she had learned, you found by accident. Others you earned through courage and sacrifice. But the greatest treasures of all were the ones you created through your choices, through your actions, through the kind of person you decided to be. And that was a treasure no pirate could steal, no storm could destroy, no time could diminish. It was hers to keep forever. 5 years had passed since Elena Cortez had sailed to the Windward Isles and found the truth of the Esperanza. 5 years of sailing, of trading, of living the life she had always loved. But something fundamental had shifted in those years, not just in Elena, but in the world around her. The Morning Star was anchored in a quiet cove on the island of Dominica, taking shelter from an afternoon rain shower. Elena stood under the canvas awning they'd stretched across the deck, watching the rain fall in silver sheets across the green water. She was 37 now, with a few strands of silver beginning to show in her dark hair, and lines at the corners of her eyes from years of squinting at horizons. Rosa approached with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Elena. Her first mate's hair had gone more grey than black now, but her eyes were as sharp as ever, and her friendship as steadfast. "Marcus just told me," Rosa said quietly, "about his decision." Elena nodded. She had known this was coming. Marcus was 21 now, a skilled sailor and a thoughtful young man, and he had decided it was time to captain his own vessel. He'll do well, Elena said. He has the skill and the temperament, and he understands what matters. He learned from the best, Rosa replied. You've trained him well, Elena. Taught him not just how to sail, but how to think, how to choose. Elena smiled. I only showed him what was already in him. The rest was his own doing. That evening, after the rain had passed and the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the crew gathered on deck for a small ceremony. Marcus stood before them, looking nervous but determined. I've been offered a position, he announced. Captain of a small merchant vessel, the Swift Wind. She's not much to look at yet, but she's sound, and she's mine to command. He paused, looking at Elena. I wouldn't be here without all of you. Without this ship and this crew. You taught me that sailing isn't just about going from one port to another. It's about the journey itself. About the choices you make along the way. About honoring the sea and the people you meet on it. Elena stepped forward and embraced him. You'll make a fine captain, Marcus. Trust yourself. Trust your crew. And remember, the greatest treasure isn't what you find, but who you become in the searching. I'll remember, Marcus promised. Everything. The island, the Guardian, the Esperanza. All of it. I'll carry those lessons with me always. After Marcus left, taking his few belongings and sailing away on a hired boat to meet his new ship, Elena felt a bittersweet ache. It was right that he should go, that he should find his own path. But she would miss his enthusiasm, his questions, his young perspective that had kept her own thinking fresh. It's the way of things, Rosa said, reading her thoughts as she so often did. We teach them, we guide them, and then we let them go. And if we've done it right, they carry forward what we've taught them and add their own wisdom to it. When did we get so old? Elena asked with a wry smile. We're not old, Rosa protested. We're experienced. There's a difference. Over the next few years, Elena noticed more changes. The Caribbean was becoming more crowded, more settled. The great age of exploration was giving way to the age of commerce and colonization. Pirates, the real ones, not the romantic figures of stories, were being hunted down and hanged. The wild, open waters Elena had known in her youth were slowly becoming tamed. But there were still mysteries. Still wonders. Still moments that reminded her why she loved the sea. She heard news, from time to time, of the Esperanza and the Revenge. Sightings were rare but consistent. A fishing boat off Antigua reported seeing two ships sailing together through impossible fog. A naval vessel near St. Lucia claimed to have heard singing carried on the wind, voices too beautiful to be human. A merchant captain swore he'd seen a galleon with an angel figurehead, glowing faintly in the moonlight, keeping pace with his ship for an hour before vanishing into the darkness. The stories grew and changed, as stories do, but at their heart remained the truth Elena knew, that the Esperanza sailed on, her crew keeping their eternal vigil, guarding the sleeping thing beneath the mountain, honoring the choice they had made. Professor Santos published his book about the Esperanza, using Captain Alvarez's journal as the primary source. It caused quite a stir in academic circles. Some scholars embraced it, others dismissed it as fantasy. But the book found its way to sailors and adventurers, and among them, it was read and believed. Elena's name appeared in it, her role in finding the journal acknowledged with gratitude. She received letters sometimes, from people who had read the book. Some wanted to know more about the island. Others wanted to mount expeditions to find the treasure. Elena answered each letter carefully, always emphasizing the same message. Some mysteries should be respected, not solved. Some treasures should be left where they are. Some sacred places should remain undisturbed. Most people didn't understand, but a few did. And that, Elena thought, was enough. On a warm evening in her 40th year, Elena sat in the same tavern where she had first told the story of the Esperanza all those years ago. The place had changed, new ownership, fresh paint, different faces behind the bar, but it still served as a gathering place for sailors and storytellers. An old sailor, truly old now, his face weathered like driftwood, was holding court at a center table. And I tell you, he was saying, his voice strong despite his age, I saw her with my own eyes. The Esperanza, sailing through the mist with a ship of black sails beside her. They were singing, the crews were, in voices like nothing I've ever heard. Beautiful and terrible at once. And I knew in my bones, that they were guarding something. Keeping watch over something that needed keeping. Elena smiled to herself. The story continued, passed from sailor to sailor, changing and growing but keeping its essential truth. The Esperanza was no longer just a lost ship, a historical footnote. She had become a legend, a reminder that not all stories end the way we expect, and that some endings are really beginnings of a different kind. A young woman approached Elena's table, barely 20, with eager eyes and the sun-darkened skin of someone who lived on the water. "Excuse me," she said shyly. "Are you Captain Cortez? The one who found the Esperanza?" "I found her story," Elena corrected gently. "The ship herself is still sailing, if the tales are true." "I want to be a captain someday," the young woman said. "Like you. I want to sail and explore and find mysteries." Elena gestured for her to sit. "What's your name?" "Isabella. I'm crew on the Sea Dancer, a merchant sloop. But I want more than just cargo runs. I don't know, adventure, purpose, something that matters." Elena saw herself in this young woman's face, the same hunger for something beyond the ordinary, the same sense that the world held wonders if you only knew where to look. "Let me give you some advice," she said. "Adventure and purpose aren't always the same thing. You can have great adventures that mean nothing. Or you can find purpose in the smallest, quietest moments. The trick is learning to recognize which is which." "How do you do that?" Isabella asked. "By paying attention," Elena replied. "By listening more than you talk. By respecting the people and places you encounter. By understanding that every choice you make ripples outward in ways you can't always see." She paused. "And by remembering that the greatest treasures are often the ones you leave behind." Isabella looked confused. "Leave behind? But isn't the point to find treasure?" "That's what I thought too, when I was your age," Elena said with a smile. "But I learned differently. Sometimes the real treasure is understanding. Sometimes it's wisdom. Sometimes it's simply knowing that you made the right choice, even when it was the harder one." She told Isabella about the Windward Isles, about the island that shouldn't exist on any map, about the choice Captain Alvarez had made and the vigil that continued still. She told it the way she always did now, with respect, with care, with an emphasis on the lessons rather than the adventure. When she finished, Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "So you found treasure," she said finally, "but you didn't take it." "I found something better than treasure," Elena corrected. "I found truth. I found purpose. I found understanding. And I brought those things back with me. They're still with me now, years later. They've shaped who I am and how I sail. That's worth more than all the gold in the Caribbean." Isabella nodded slowly, processing this. "Thank you, Captain. For the story. For the advice. I'll remember it." After she left, Rosa leaned over from the next table. "Still teaching," she observed. "Still shaping the next generation." "Someone has to," Elena said. "If we don't pass along what we've learned, it dies with us. And these lessons, about respect, about wisdom, about choosing honor over greed, they're too important to let die." "Captain Alvarez would be proud," Rosa said. "He wrote that journal so someone would understand. And you've made sure that understanding has spread far beyond what he could have imagined." Elena thought about that as they walked back to the Morning Star through the warm night. The captain had died, or rather, had chosen a different kind of life, 70 years ago now. But his choice still mattered. His story still resonated. His sacrifice still meant something. That was the power of stories, Elena realized. They didn't die. They continued, passed from person to person, generation to generation, each telling adding new layers while preserving the essential truth at the core. She was part of that story now. Not the hero, exactly, but the witness. The one who had seen and understood and carried the truth forward. And now she was passing it along to others, who would carry it forward in turn. That night, lying in her hammock aboard the Morning Star, Elena listened to the gentle sounds of the ship at rest. The creak of wood, the lap of water against the hull, the soft breathing of her crew in their sleep. These sounds had been her lullaby for more than 20 years now. They were as familiar as her own heartbeat. She thought about all the voyages she had taken, all the ports she had visited, all the people she had met. Each one had added something to who she was. But the voyage to the Windward Isles remained the most significant. That was the one that had changed her, but had shown her what really mattered. She thought about the Guardian, keeping her eternal watch on that misty mountaintop. Was she lonely, or had she found peace in her purpose? Elena suspected it was both, that loneliness and purpose could coexist, that you could feel isolated and still be exactly where you needed to be. And she thought about Captain Alvarez and his men, about Captain Blackwood and his crew, about all the souls now sailing with the Esperanza through mist and legend. Were they content? Did they regret their choices? Or had they found something in their eternal vigil that made the sacrifice worthwhile? Elena would never know for certain, but she chose to believe they had found peace. That their choice, difficult as it was, had been the right one for them. That they were exactly where they needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. And that belief, whether true or simply comforting, helped her sleep peacefully under the stars, with the sea rocking her gently and the wind singing its old, eternal song through the rigging overhead. Elena Cortez was 50 years old when she made her final voyage to the Windward Isles. She hadn't planned it as a final voyage, hadn't planned it at all, really. But sometimes the sea calls you back to places you've been, and you learn to trust those callings. The Morning Star was showing her age now, as was Elena. 28 years they'd sailed together, through calm and storm, through adventure and routine. The ship's wood was weathered but sound, her sails patched but serviceable. She was comfortable, familiar, like an old friend who knew all your stories. Rosa was still aboard, now white-haired and prone to stiffness in her joints on cold mornings, but still sharp-minded and capable. Most of the original crew had moved on, to other ships, to families ashore, to graves in the sea or on land. But the Morning Star had trained new sailors over the years, and the current crew was as skilled and trustworthy as any Elena had known. They were sailing from Martinique to Antigua with a cargo of rum and spices when the wind shifted in that particular way Elena had learned to recognize. A subtle change in pressure, a slight cooling of the air, a quality to the light that spoke of something beyond ordinary weather. She checked her charts and saw they were passing within 20 miles of the island without a name, the island that shouldn't exist on maps but did exist in reality. The island where the Guardian kept her vigil and the Esperanza had begun its eternal voyage. Rosa, Elena called. Her first mate came to the helm, and Elena pointed to their position. We're near the island. Rosa studied the charts, then looked at Elena. Do you want to visit? I don't know, Elena admitted. Part of me feels like I should. Like there's a reason the wind has brought us this close. But another part of me wonders if it's better to leave the memory untouched. To not risk changing how I remember it. When has caution ever stopped you? Rosa asked with a slight smile. Elena laughed. Fair point. She made her decision. We'll sail closer. See what feels right when we get there. If the wind favors it, we'll anchor and go ashore. If not, we'll take it as a sign to continue on our way. The wind did favor it. As they approached the archipelago, the breeze shifted to push them directly toward the crescent-shaped island with 3 peaks. The mist was there, as it always was, wreathing the mountains in grey veils even in the bright afternoon. They anchored in the same bay Elena remembered from 15 years ago. The water was as clear as ever, the beaches pristine. Nothing seemed to have changed, as if time moved differently here, or perhaps didn't move at all. Who wants to come ashore? Elena asked her crew. To her surprise, everyone volunteered. These sailors had all heard the story of the Esperanza. It was part of the Morning Star's culture now, told and retold on long voyages. They had heard about the island, about the Guardian, about the treasure that remained unclaimed. They wanted to see it for themselves. Very well, Elena said, but we go with respect. This is a sacred place. We're visitors, and will behave accordingly. They took 2 boats ashore, 10 people in all, including Elena and Rosa. As they pulled the boats onto the beach, Elena felt a strange sensation, as if she was stepping back in time, as if the 15 years since her last visit had been erased and she was young again, full of curiosity and uncertainty. But no, she wasn't young anymore. And she wasn't uncertain. She was a woman who had lived and learned, who had made choices and accepted their consequences, who had found wisdom in unexpected places and carried it forward. They walked inland, following the stream toward the waterfall. The carved symbol was still there, worn by time but recognizable. The clearing where Captain Alvarez's crew had camped showed few signs of that long-ago occupation now. Nature had reclaimed it, covered it over with new growth. Should we climb the mountain? One of the younger crew members asked, a woman named Anna who reminded Elena of herself at that age. Elena looked up at the 3 peaks, disappearing into mist. Not all of us, she decided. The climb is difficult, and not everyone needs to see what's at the top. But those who feel called to it, those who understand what they are climbing toward, they can come with me. In the end, it was Elena, Rosa, and Anna who made the ascent. The others remained in the clearing, keeping watch, perhaps sensing that this was something that shouldn't be done lightly or in large numbers. The climb was harder than Elena remembered. Her legs weren't as strong as they'd been, her lungs not as capable. But she persevered, Rosa beside her, Anna ahead of them with the energy of youth. They broke through the mist into clear air, onto the plateau where the shrine stood. And Elena caught her breath. The shrine had changed. Or rather, it had grown. The circle of stones was larger now, more elaborate. And inside it, arranged with care, were more offerings than Elena remembered, shells and flowers, yes, but also other things. A ship's compass, old and corroded. A silver cross on a chain. A child's doll, somehow preserved despite decades of exposure. Letters, sealed in bottles, their paper yellow with age. What is all this? Anna asked quietly. Offerings, Rosa replied. From people who've been here over the years. From those who understood the significance of this place and wanted to leave something. A token of respect. A prayer, perhaps. The golden idol was still there, still gleaming on its altar stone, its jade eyes still seeming to watch. But around it now were other objects, including, Elena noticed, a silver pocket watch that looked familiar. She picked it up carefully and opened it. Inside, engraved on the case, were the initials GB. Captain Blackwood's watch, Elena murmured. Someone brought it here. Left it as an offering. Or he left it himself, Rosa suggested quietly. Before he climbed higher. Before he made his choice. They continued upward, through the passage in the rock. The cloth markers Elena had tied 15 years ago were long gone, of course, but she remembered the way. The chamber with the treasure was exactly as she remembered it. The gold and jewels still arranged in careful rows, dusty and untouched. The skeletal remains of Captain Alvarez and his men still sat against the far wall, peaceful in their eternal rest. Anna gasped when she saw them, but Elena noticed the young woman didn't look afraid, only awed, respectful. They really stayed, Anna whispered. They really chose to remain. They did, Elena confirmed. Because they understood that some things are more important than survival. Some purposes are worth any sacrifice. They climbed to the summit, emerging into brilliant sunlight and clear air. The view was as breathtaking as Elena remembered, the endless blue Caribbean stretching to the horizon, the islands scattered like jewels, the curve of the world visible in the distance. But the summit was empty. The woman in white, the guardian, was not there. Elena felt a strange mix of disappointment and acceptance. Perhaps the guardian only appeared when needed. Or perhaps she was there but invisible, choosing not to reveal herself. Or perhaps, and this thought made Elena smile, perhaps she was out on the water, sailing with the Esperanza, taking a brief respite from her mountaintop vigil. But then Elena heard it. Soft at first, then clearer. The sound of singing. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Women's voices, high and clear, singing in that ancient language Elena didn't understand but felt in her bones. And woven through it, male voices, the crew of the Esperanza, perhaps, and the crew of the Revenge, all singing together in harmony. Anna heard it too, her eyes wide with wonder. Is that them? The ships? I think so, Elena replied. She walked to the edge of the summit and looked out at the sea. And there, just at the edge of visibility, she saw something that might have been mist, might have been clouds, might have been 2 ships sailing side by side, their forms indistinct but unmistakable. The singing swelled, and Elena felt tears on her cheeks though she hadn't realized she was crying. It was so beautiful, so haunting, so full of loneliness and purpose and patience and hope. It was the sound of people who had found their place, however strange that place might be, who had made their choice and lived, or continued in some form beyond living, with the consequences. And then, standing there on that mountaintop with the singing filling the air around her, Elena understood something she hadn't quite grasped before. The Guardian hadn't been punishing anyone. She hadn't been trapping souls or claiming victims. She had been offering a choice, a genuine choice, to those who climbed her mountain. Stay and guard what needs guarding, or go and live your ordinary life. Both choices had consequences. Both choices had value. Captain Alvarez had chosen to stay because he understood the importance of the vigil. His men had chosen the same, one by one. Captain Blackwood and his crew, well, perhaps they had resisted at first, but eventually they too had understood and accepted. They had joined the Eternal Watch not as prisoners but as willing participants in something larger than themselves. Captain. Anna's voice broke through Elena's thoughts. Are you all right? Elena wiped her eyes and smiled. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm complete, I think. I needed to come back here one more time. To see. To understand fully. And now I have. They stood together on the summit for a while longer, listening to the singing fade slowly back to silence. Then they made their way back down the mountain, through the passages and chambers, past the shrine with its offerings, down through the mist and the forest to the beach where the morning star waited. As they rowed back to the ship, Elena looked back at the island one last time. The mist swirled around the peaks, and for just a moment, she thought she saw a figure in white standing at the summit, looking out at the sea. But when she blinked, the figure was gone, if it had ever been there at all. That evening, as the morning star sailed away from the island, Elena gathered her crew on deck. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those familiar shades of amber and rose that had marked so many significant moments in her life. I want to tell you all something, Elena said. I'm getting older. The sea has been good to me, but there will come a time, sooner rather than later, when I'll need to give up active sailing. When I'll need to trust the morning star to someone else. The crew exchanged glances, surprised but not, perhaps, entirely shocked. They had seen her struggling on the climb today, had noticed how she tired more easily than she used to. But before that day comes, Elena continued, I want to make sure you all understand what we've been part of. Not just this crew, but everyone who's sailed on the Morning Star over the years. We've been more than just sailors or traders. We've been keepers of stories. Guardians of wisdom. We've tried to sail with honor, to treat people and places with respect, to understand that the world is full of mysteries that deserve our reverence. She paused, looking at each face in turn. The story of the Esperanza is part of who we are now. It's taught us that some treasures should be left where they are. That sacrifice can be noble. That choices matter, even when, especially when, they are difficult. I ask you to carry these lessons forward, to pass them along to others, to keep the story alive so that it continues to teach and inspire. We will, Captain, Anna said, and the others nodded agreement. Elena smiled. Good. Then my work here is almost done. But not quite. Not yet. The morning star sailed on through the gathering darkness, her crew settling into the evening watch, her captain standing at the helm with Rosa beside her. The stars emerged one by one overhead, the same stars that had guided sailors for thousands of years. That's really it, isn't it? Rosa said quietly. Your last voyage to the island. You won't go back again. No, Elena agreed. I won't need to. I've seen what I needed to see. I've understood what I needed to understand. The story is complete for me now. What happens next belongs to others. To Anna, to Isabella, to all the young sailors who will hear the tale and make their own journeys, their own choices. You've lived a good life, Elena, Rosa said. A meaningful one. You've taught a lot of people a lot of important things. We've taught them together, Elena corrected. You've been with me through all of it, Rosa. Every voyage, every decision, every lesson learned. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Rosa smiled. Then I'm glad I was here. Glad we took that journey together. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Behind them, the Windward Isles disappeared into the darkness. Somewhere in that darkness, an island waited, shrouded in mist, keeping its secrets. Somewhere in the mist, two ships sailed their eternal course, their crews singing in the darkness, maintaining their vigil over something ancient and powerful that slept in the depths below. And here, on the Morning Star, Captain Elena Cortez sailed toward whatever came next, not the end of the story, but simply another chapter in the endless tale of the sea and those who loved it. The wind was steady, the stars were bright, the crew was capable, and the world, the strange, beautiful, mysterious world, spread out before them, full of wonders waiting to be discovered by those brave enough and wise enough to seek them. Elena smiled and felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. She had done what she set out to do. She had solved mysteries and respected boundaries. She had taken what she needed and left behind what she shouldn't take. She had learned wisdom and shared it freely. The rest, as they say, was just sailing. And Elena Cortez had always loved to sail.